He divorced me at 53 and moved his new wife into our house. He told me I was too boring, too predictable, that after 30 years, he needed someone who made him feel alive again. Then he handed me divorce papers, married his mistress, and moved her into the home I had decorated with my own hands. They thought I'd walk away quietly, that I'd just fade into the background. But they forgot one thing. The house was never just his, and I still had the deed. Before I begin, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, let me tell you what really happened. I was 53 years old when Marcus told me he wanted a divorce. We were sitting in our sunroom, the one I had designed when we renovated 5 years ago. The afternoon light was streaming through the windows, highlighting the dust particles dancing in the air. He couldn't even look me in the eye, just stared at his hands folded in his lap and said, "Vanessa, I think we've grown in different directions." Different directions? Like I was a road he no longer wanted to travel. We'd been married 30 years. I put my career as an interior designer on hold when Lydia was born, because Marcus's surgical practice was demanding and someone had to raise our daughter. I managed our home. I hosted dinner parties for his colleagues, maintained our social calendar, and cared for his father after his stroke for 3 years without complaint. I didn't ask for the world, just a little respect, a little loyalty. Instead, I got divorce papers on a Thursday and was expected to be civil by Friday. By the end of the month, he moved out, said he needed space to figure things out. I found out later he didn't move into a hotel or a bachelor pad. He moved in with her. Kendra, the pharmaceutical rep he'd introduced to me 18 months ago at a hospital fundraiser. She was 36, nearly the same age as our daughter. Marcus didn't even try to be discreet. Within weeks, they were posting photos from weekend getaways, smiling at charity galas, posing in front of landmarks in Europe. Meanwhile, I was alone in the home we built together, sitting on furniture I had carefully selected, staring at walls I had painstakingly painted the perfect shade of sage. Lydia tried to stay neutral. Poor thing. She was 28, grown with her own family, but still caught in the crossfire. "I don't want to choose sides, Mom," she told me. I simply replied, "You don't have to. I already know where everyone stands." Then one morning, I got an email. Not from Marcus, from Kendra. It was so perfectly formatted it looked like a corporate newsletter. The subject line read, "Moving Forward," and the email said, "Dear Vanessa, please arrange a convenient time to collect any remaining personal items from the residence. Marcus and I are settling in, and we'd prefer to begin this new chapter without lingering attachments. Weekday mornings work best. Regards, Kendra Hamilton Pierce." Kendra Hamilton Pierce. She took my name, moved into my house, had the audacity to call me a lingering attachment. I sat at my desk, reading the email over and over. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't notice. My hands weren't shaking with grief. They were steady with rage. That house was mine. We bought it together, but I was the one who found it, the one who negotiated the price down after the inspection revealed foundation issues. My name was still on the mortgage. Marcus never refinanced. He said it was too complicated with his other investments. Well, that complication was about to become a very serious problem. I picked up my phone and called my closest friend, Diane. She'd been a real estate attorney for over 20 years and knew me better than anyone. When I explained the situation, she went quiet. Then she asked, "Vanessa, is your name still on the deed?" "Yes," I said. "He never changed it." "And he never bought you out of your half?" she continued. "No." "Vanessa," she said, her voice taking on that precise legal tone I knew so well. "You still legally own half that house." I blinked. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means you don't have to ask for anything. You can file for what's called a partition action. You can force a sale or make them buy you out." I didn't speak for a moment. Then I asked, "If they can't afford to buy me out, would they have to leave?" Diane's voice was calm but firm. "Yes, they would." I looked out the window at the maple tree Marcus and I had planted when we first moved in. It was in full bloom now, oblivious to how much had changed. I took a deep breath and said, "Do it." Marcus called me 2 days later, his voice a strange mixture of confusion and indignation. "Vanessa, did you really talk to a lawyer about the house?" "Yes." "Why? Why are you making this so difficult? Haven't I given you enough already? I laughed, though there was no humor in it. I'm just claiming what's legally mine, Marcus. That's all. He tried his doctor voice on me, the one he used to calm anxious patients. He told me I was bitter, that I needed to accept reality, that Kendra felt uncomfortable with me hovering around their lives. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, then perhaps she shouldn't be living in a house that still has my name on the title. He hung up, but it wasn't over. Kendra emailed me again, this time dropping all pretense of professionalism. She wrote that I was embarrassing myself and should let go with grace. She said, Marcus deserves happiness after decades of feeling trapped, and you're only proving why he needed to leave. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Diane again and said, let's move forward. Full speed. We filed the official court paperwork. The petition was precise, legitimate, and undeniable. I wasn't making noise, I was making moves. Marcus didn't see it coming, and neither did she. Diane told me to stay quiet. Let the legal system speak for me. But when I pulled into the driveway of what used to be my home and saw Kendra's red Tesla parked where my car used to be, I had to take a moment to breathe. I wasn't there to create drama. I was there to collect the last of my belongings, as her email had so graciously suggested. Except I didn't ring the doorbell. I used my key. The one Marcus forgot I still had because he never thought to change the locks. I opened the door and walked into my own living room. The furniture was the same, but everything else felt wrong. The walls were now some stark white that made the room feel cold and clinical. My family photos were gone, replaced by abstract art pieces that looked like they had been selected to match the furniture rather than tell a story. I walked into the kitchen. She'd rearranged everything. My beloved copper pots were nowhere to be seen. The vintage tea caddy my mother had given me now held protein powder packets. I could feel something building inside me. Not grief, but certainty. Pure, unwavering certainty that I was doing the right thing. Kendra came down the stairs in workout clothes, her hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail. She stopped when she saw me, her expression shifting from surprise to irritation. What are you doing here? She asked, voice tight. I came to get my things, I said, holding up my phone with her email displayed. As requested. You're supposed to call first, she said. We have boundaries now, Vanessa. I walked past her with measured steps. Well, dear, as long as my name is still on this house, I'll exercise my rights as I see fit. Her face flushed. Marcus will hear about this. Good, I said. He should have been here himself, it's the least he could do. I packed quietly. A few boxes of books, some jewelry, photo albums, Lydia had asked me to save for her. I didn't need much. I'd already decided I would never live in this house again. Not because I couldn't, but because I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of thinking they had the power to push me out. Kendra followed me from room to room, arms crossed, sighing dramatically. I heard her mutter under her breath. Pathetic. I stopped and turned to face her. Excuse me? She straightened her back, chin tilted up. You couldn't keep your husband interested for 30 years, and now you're playing these childish games. You're jealous because he chose someone vibrant instead of someone comfortable. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I simply said, vibrant doesn't last, and I'm not playing games. I'm just claiming what's mine. Then I left. That night, Diane called to say the paperwork had gone through. The court had accepted the partition action. Marcus and Kendra would be officially notified the next morning. Do you want to deliver it yourself? She asked. No, I said. Let the system deliver the news. The next day, Marcus called me 5 times. I didn't answer. He left one message. Vanessa, what the hell do you think you're doing? This is insane. You're forcing us to sell the house after everything I've given you. I actually laughed out loud. Everything he'd given me? I was the one who compromised my career, who raised our daughter, who managed our social lives so he could focus on his practice. I didn't abandon our vows. He did. He tried calling again the following day. I ignored him again. On the 3rd day, I picked up. Vanessa, we need to talk about this like adults, he began. So talk, I replied. Why are you doing this to us? You mean legally exercising my right to my share of a property I still own? That's hardly something being done to you, Marcus. You know we can't afford to buy you out right now. The market's at its peak. Then perhaps you should have considered that before making permanent decisions about our marriage. His tone softened, became almost pleading. Vanessa, be reasonable. This kind of stress isn't good for either of us. No, I agreed, it isn't. But you created this situation, not me. Then I hung up. 3 days later, Kendra called. Not texted, called. She was clearly upset. You're destroying everything, she said, her voice breaking. You're humiliating us in front of everyone we know. Please, Vanessa, can't you just be mature about this? I paused before answering. Being mature means understanding consequences. And I'm done diminishing myself to make either of you comfortable. Then I blocked her number. From that point forward, I didn't engage directly. I let Diane handle the legal communication and let the paperwork do its job. Marcus and Kendra hired their own lawyer, tried to challenge the partition. It didn't work. The judge reviewed the deed, the mortgage, and delivered the verdict. Mrs. Pierce remains a legal co-owner. Unless the parties agree to a private buyout, the property must be sold. Diane smiled at me in court. I didn't smile back. I was focused on the endgame. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about resolution. They still had access. They still had comfort. They still had each other. But they also had a deadline. 60 days to either buy me out or vacate for a sale. And I already knew they couldn't afford to buy me out. Marcus had overextended himself with the new cars, the luxury vacations, the expensive gifts for Kendra. His practice was successful, but not unlimited. I drove past the house one morning and saw a for sale by owner sign planted in the front yard. They were trying to handle it themselves, avoid realtor commissions, perhaps make a quick private sale. But the market had started to cool, and karma doesn't operate on anyone's preferred timeline. I sat down at my new kitchen table in my modest but peaceful rental apartment and lit a candle. Not for them, but for me. Because this wasn't about destruction. It was about restoration. They were about to discover what it feels like to be removed from something you thought was securely yours. Kendra started posting cryptic quotes on social media. Some people cling to the past because they're afraid of their future. Bitterness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. The comments were flooded with supportive messages from people who didn't know the whole story. But I wasn't interested in public opinion. I wasn't concerned with her carefully curated image of victimhood. This wasn't emotional warfare. This was legal consequence. By week 3, the for sale by owner sign was replaced with a professional realtor sign. I recognized the agency name. Diane had made a few strategic calls. We weren't going to let them undervalue the property or arrange some quiet transfer to avoid fair market value. If they were going to sell the house, it had to be priced correctly, which meant they had to cooperate with me. Marcus texted me again. This time, his tone was different. We need to talk about showing the house. I didn't respond. Can you please not make this more difficult than it needs to be? Kendra's already stressed enough. I almost replied. She wasn't stressed when she wore workout clothes in my kitchen and called me pathetic. But I took a deep breath and forwarded the message to Diane. She handled everything with the realtor. I didn't need to set foot in that house again, and that was by design. Let them feel the walls closing in. Let them walk through rooms they thought they owned and realize how quickly security can vanish. By the time showings began, they were already unraveling. Kendra called the listing agent in tears, asking if they could postpone viewings until they found a new place. The agent politely reminded her this was a court-ordered sale, not a convenience. They had to keep the house immaculate, ready for strangers to walk through and evaluate their countertops, their flooring, their lives. I heard through Lydia that Marcus and Kendra were arguing constantly. That he had told her, "This is what happens when you underestimate someone." I wasn't someone to be underestimated. I was the deed holder. They hadn't just misjudged me. They had fundamentally misunderstood who I was. I wasn't the kind of woman who screamed or threw things. I was the kind of woman who signed documents with a steady hand and waited for the consequences to bloom. At week 6, an offer came in. Full asking price, minimal contingencies. The buyers were a family relocating for work with 3 children and a golden retriever. They fell in love with the house immediately. Diane told me before she told anyone else. They wanted a quick closing, 30 days. I said, perfect. Marcus called me 4 times that day. I didn't answer. I was at a spa, getting a massage and a facial. I was investing in myself for the first time in decades. Later that evening, I checked my voicemail. First message: Vanessa, please, we need to talk about this offer. This is moving too fast. Second message: you're really going to let strangers take over our home? 30 years of memories? Third message: I know we ended badly, but this is vindictive. You're leaving us with nothing. Fourth message: call me back, damn it. This affects all of us. It was the first time he'd said it out loud. All of us. As if they were a unit now. As if his betrayal had evolved into something legitimate. I suppose that was his way of acknowledging that Kendra was in this with him, for better or worse. Unfortunately for them, worse was what I had left. The day of the final walkthrough, Marcus and Kendra had to be out of the house for 3 hours. They requested a brief extension to tie up loose ends, but the buyers had already scheduled movers. The timeline was set. When they walked out of that house for the last time, they weren't owners anymore. They were former occupants with keys that no longer worked. Me? I was $425,000 richer. My half of the proceeds after fees and commissions. Half of what was always legally mine. Marcus finally broke his silence in person. He showed up at my rental apartment, knocking with the same confidence he always had, as if he still had the right to my time, my attention. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. He looked different. Not physically, but something in his eyes had changed. The certainty was gone. I need to ask you something, he said. I waited. Can you help us with the security deposit on our new place? We're tight right now. I stared at him in disbelief. Excuse me? He ran a hand through his hair. I know how it sounds, but we had no idea this would all happen so quickly. You thought I'd stay quiet? I finished for him. He nodded. You've never been confrontational. I'm not confrontational, I corrected him. I'm methodical. There's a difference. He shifted awkwardly. Kendra's staying with her sister. I'm at the extended stay near the hospital. I didn't think it would end like this. You ended it, I reminded him. You made your choices. You moved her into my house while the ink on our divorce papers was barely dry. He had the audacity to look wounded. We were in love. Love doesn't erase legal obligations. Love doesn't justify disrespect. And love certainly doesn't send emails telling me to schedule appointments to visit my own home. His eyes dropped to the floor. I leaned against the doorframe, suddenly feeling lighter than I had in months. You didn't just replace me, Marcus. You erased me, so I returned the favor. He stood there for a moment, then nodded slowly. No argument, no defense, just quiet acceptance of defeat. When he left, I didn't close the door right away. I watched him walk back to his car, a man who had lost not just his wife, but his certainty that the world would always bend to his will. I thought about the years I spent accommodating his needs, his schedule, his ambitions. I thought about every time I rearranged my life so his could proceed uninterrupted. I thought about the nights I spent alone in that house while he worked late, never questioning, always trusting. And I smiled. Because sometimes, justice doesn't arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it comes with a signature on a legal document, and the realization that you bet everything on someone who never bothered to read the fine print. Let them figure out where to go next. I already knew where I was headed. A week after the sale closed, the house I had helped create became someone else's beginning. I didn't cry. I didn't even drive by. Diane suggested we meet for dinner to celebrate, and we did, at a small bistro downtown. She raised her wine glass and said, "You did what most people only dream of doing. You made them feel exactly what they made you feel, replaceable." I nodded, but inside I knew it wasn't just about retaliation. It was about reclamation, dignity, closure, and yes, perhaps a touch of justice too. Marcus and Kendra had officially vacated the property 3 days before closing. The real estate agent told Diane they left it clean, but empty, like a hotel room someone checked out of in a hurry. I could picture it. Kendra trying to direct movers while simmering with resentment. Marcus probably walking through each room, muttering about lawyers and paperwork and me. They thought I was petty, but I wasn't the one who crossed the line first. They did that when they moved her into my home like I had vanished into thin air. Lydia called me the following evening. "Mom," she began cautiously, "Dad's not doing great." I remained silent. He's staying in a corporate rental. He said something about having to divert money to lawyers, said Kendra's blaming him for everything. She should, I said simply. He let her play queen in a castle built on sand. Lydia sighed. I didn't want to get in the middle of all this. You already did, I said gently, when you watched them disrespect me and said nothing. She didn't respond right away. Then she whispered, I'm sorry. I didn't need her to grovel. I just needed her to understand the depth of what had occurred, not just to me, but to the very concept of family, of respect, of consequences. Later that week, I received an email from Kendra. It began with the usual artificial politeness. Vanessa, I know we've had our differences. She continued to explain they were struggling to find a suitable new home within their budget. She asked if I might consider loaning them a portion of my proceeds from the house sale to help during this transition period. She even had the nerve to write, after all, you came out of this with a windfall you weren't expecting, while we lost everything. I stared at the screen for a long time, reading and rereading her words. Then, I clicked delete. No reply, no acknowledgement, no reaction. That silence would speak volumes. Diane told me they'd likely end up renting something much smaller than our former home. There's poetry in that, she added. They treated you like you were diminished, and now they're the ones being downsized. I spent the next few weeks in something close to peace. I took a part-time position at an art gallery, something to engage my mind and connect me with creative people. The work was fulfilling, respectful, and surrounded by beauty, which felt appropriate. I had my own small apartment now, nothing extravagant, but entirely mine. No shared title, no divided closet space, no compromises, just room to breathe, solitude to heal, and space to rediscover myself. One afternoon, while arranging a new exhibition, a woman approached me. She looked vaguely familiar, perhaps a friend of a friend from my previous life. Vanessa, she said. I heard what happened. I just wanted to say, you handled that with incredible dignity. I thanked her, but she leaned closer and added, and strength. That word stayed with me. Strength. I had never thought of myself that way before, but perhaps it does take a certain kind of power to lose everything and still find the resolve to build something better in its place. Quietly, intentionally, without begging for validation or permission. A few days later, I saw Marcus again, not by choice. I was picking up my prescription at the pharmacy when I noticed a man waiting on a bench, scrolling through his phone. He looked tired, collar slightly wrinkled, hair a bit too long. It took me a moment to realize it was him. He looked up and saw me, immediately standing. Vanessa, I nodded but continued walking. He followed me to my car. I'm not trying to start anything, he said. I just wanted to check how you're doing. I paused. What do you really want, Marcus? He shifted his weight. I never thought you'd go through with it all. The court, the sale, everything. I leaned against my car door. You thought I was too weak to stand up for myself. He shook his head. No, I thought you were too loyal, even to someone who didn't deserve it. That struck deeper than I expected because he had identified the very quality he had exploited for years. My loyalty. Well, I said softly, I guess we both misjudged each other. He laughed, a hollow sound. Kendra's gone. Back to Chicago, said I wasn't worth the trouble, that she gave up her apartment and her friends for a man who couldn't even maintain what he promised her. I didn't ask if she was wrong. I didn't need to. I studied him for a moment, this man I had spent 3 decades with, then opened my car door. Good luck, Marcus. He reached out as if he wanted to say more, but I was already sliding into the driver's seat. I didn't owe him another minute of my time, not anymore. When I got home that evening, I opened the folder Diane had given me weeks earlier. It contained all the documentation from the sale, the deed transfer, the settlement statement, the final distribution, and something extra. A handwritten note from Diane that said, you didn't just get your share, you got your life back. I folded the note and placed it in my journal. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, lit my favorite candle, and put on some music. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something, or grieving something, or holding on to something. I was simply living. And the silence around me wasn't loneliness anymore. It was freedom. About 2 months after I ran into Marcus at the pharmacy, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately, precise and slightly slanted, just like the way Kendra had signed her emails. I opened the envelope with steady hands, already knowing it wouldn't contain an apology. I was right. It wasn't an apology. It was an accusation dressed up as a farewell. One of those "you've won, but at what cost" messages. She wrote that I'd destroyed 2 lives and derailed a future, as if I had done anything more than claim what was legally mine. Near the end, she scribbled, "I hope it was worth it." I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer. I didn't tear it up. I didn't burn it. I didn't even feel anger rise in my throat because it was worth it. Every moment of silence, every signature on every document, every tear I never allowed them to see. Later that week, Lydia invited me to dinner. She'd been making more of an effort lately. I could tell the fog had lifted for her. Perhaps she was starting to see her father and Kendra without the filter of politeness. I didn't hold her previous neutrality against her anymore, not because it hadn't hurt, but because carrying that weight would only slow my progress. We met at a small restaurant overlooking the river. Nothing extravagant, but warm and inviting. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her napkin even after we'd ordered. "I want to say thank you," she finally said. "For what?" "For showing me what it looks like to refuse to be erased." I looked at her for a long moment, not because I was surprised, but because her recognition felt so overdue, yet perfectly timed. "I didn't know how to stand up to him," she admitted. "He's always been so sure of himself. But you didn't just lose a husband, you lost your identity in that marriage. And then you turned around and reclaimed it on your own terms." I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I just took a deep breath and said, "I didn't do it to punish him, sweetheart. I did it so I could remember who I was before I became Mrs. Marcus Pierce. So that women like you know they don't have to disappear just because someone decides they're inconvenient." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I've got a spare room in our house," she said. "You can come stay with us anytime. We'll help you find something permanent, something special, something that's yours and only yours." I smiled and shook my head. "I already have something special," I said. "Peace." A month later, I found myself walking into a community center for a women's support group. Diane had signed me up as a guest speaker without asking first. "Just talk about your experience," she said. "You'd be surprised how many women need to hear it." I was reluctant at first. I wasn't some polished motivational speaker. I was just a woman who had survived betrayal and found a way forward. But when I looked around that room at the tired eyes, the tense shoulders, the cautious smiles, I saw reflections of myself. Not the composed woman sitting there with legal victories and financial security. No, I saw the Vanessa who used to cry in the shower so no one would hear. The Vanessa who used to think accommodation was the same as love. So I stood up and told them everything. Not just about Marcus or Kendra or the lawsuit. I told them about the evenings I spent alone at a dinner table set for one in a house I helped pay for. About the way people looked at me with pity, as if being replaced was somehow my failure. About how silence becomes a prison when no one values your voice anymore. And then I told them how I got free. Not through rage, not through begging, not through drama or violence, but through knowing my worth, understanding my rights, and recognizing the power of a signature on the right piece of paper. When I finished, an older woman hugged me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "You reminded me that it's never too late to reclaim yourself." That night, I went home and took out a new journal. Not the one I'd used to document my heartbreak months ago, but a fresh one with clean pages. And on the first page I wrote, "This is not a second act. This is an entirely new play." The next morning, Diane called with news. The family who bought my former home had fully moved in. They had 3 children, a dog, and plans to build a tree house in the backyard. "They said it already feels like home," she told me. That made me smile genuinely. That house deserved life. It deserved laughter again. It deserved warmth that wasn't forced or artificial. As for Marcus, last I heard he was renting a 1-bedroom apartment close to the hospital, downsizing his practice to manage his new financial reality. Kendra had disappeared from social media entirely. Some mutual acquaintances said she'd moved back to Chicago, telling people she needed space from a difficult situation. I don't waste energy wondering about them anymore. Because the day they decided I was disposable, when they moved her into my home and treated me like an inconvenience, they handed me the key to my own liberation. All I did was turn it. Now, I sit in a kitchen that belongs only to me. There's no echo of anyone else's expectations, just me, my coffee, and the quiet hum of a life I built from scattered pieces. The mug I'm holding says plot twist, a gift from Lydia that makes me smile every time I use it. I don't think about what I lost anymore. I think about what I reclaimed, my dignity, my voice, my future. And the most satisfying part, I did it all without ever raising my voice. Because silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's the beginning of revolution. Some people believe the story ends once justice is served. Once you've filed the papers, completed the sale, and watched those who disrespected you pack their belongings and disappear. They think that's the final scene. Revenge achieved, balance restored, curtain falls. But life continues beyond the last page. And sometimes the most powerful chapter of your story begins after everyone assumes you've faded away. That was me. After Marcus and Kendra vanished from my daily existence, one to a modest apartment with beige walls, the other to obscurity in a city that didn't know my name, I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I simply breathed. It was the kind of exhale you don't realize you've been holding until your lungs burn with relief. I took that money from the house sale, $425,000 after expenses and taxes, and I didn't splurge. I didn't buy a luxury car or book a first-class ticket to Paris. I sat down with Diane and a financial advisor and did what every woman who has been underestimated should do. I made a plan. We met with a certified financial planner, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. She reviewed my documents, asked the right questions, and said, "Let's make sure this money outlasts the hurt." I smiled. That was exactly what I wanted. I invested most of it, bought a small but elegant condominium in my name only. No cosigners, no joint anything. Everything from the doorknob to the mailbox belonged solely to me. Then I disappeared. Not dramatically, not permanently. I mean socially, digitally, emotionally. I deactivated my social media accounts, stopped attending the same charity functions where whispers would follow me like perfume. I let people wonder where I'd gone, let them guess whether I'd had a breakdown or found enlightenment. I moved, not far, just enough. A quiet neighborhood 20 minutes from my old life. Far enough from the chaos, far from the memories, far from anyone who would ever introduce me as Marcus's ex-wife. Here, people know me as Miss Vanessa, the woman who volunteers at the community garden, who brings homemade scones to neighborhood meetings, who reads poetry at the local bookstore on Thursday evenings. No one here knows that I once cried myself to sleep in a house that was legally mine but emotionally stolen. No one knows that my silence once fed someone else's ego. And I prefer it that way. Occasionally I receive messages from former acquaintances, people who used to pity me suddenly wanting to reconnect. Sometimes it's women going through similar situations asking for advice. Sometimes it's curiosity masked as concern. And once, it was Marcus. He sent me a text last winter. It said simply, "I'm sorry for everything." I didn't respond. Not because I hadn't forgiven him, but because some conversations are complete even in their absence. Some silences are the final word. But I didn't stop there. One day, sitting on my balcony watching the sunset, I realized I wasn't finished growing. Not just personally, but something larger. So I took a portion of the proceeds, $75,000, and created a scholarship fund for women returning to education after major life transitions. Anonymous. No recognition, just a transfer, and a stipulation that said, "For the women who are still becoming." The University Foundation later wrote that the fund had already helped 5 women complete degrees they had abandoned for marriages, children, or caregiving responsibilities. That's what legacy looks like. Not just weathering your own storm, but building shelter for those still caught in the rain. I don't tell my whole story to everyone. They don't need every detail. They don't need to know about the smug emails, or the courtroom tension, or how Marcus looked when he realized I wasn't going to bend. But sometimes, I sit at my writing desk, sunlight streaming through the curtains I chose, a fresh cup of tea beside me, and I document it all. Not for them. For me. To remind myself of who I was when I walked through fire and emerged unburned. You see, Marcus didn't just lose a wife. He lost access to my patience, my forgiveness, my silence. Kendra didn't just lose a house. She lost the illusion that she could build happiness on someone else's foundation and not feel it crumble. They both learned a lesson most people never see coming. Never assume the quiet ones are weak. Never assume the polite ones don't know how to destroy you legally. Never assume the woman you wronged has nothing left to lose. Because sometimes she's just waiting for the right moment. And when that moment comes, she won't scream. She won't beg. She won't even look back. She'll cash out. And you'll be left homeless, not just without a roof, but without peace. So now when I drink from my mug that says plot twist, I do it slowly. Because I've earned every drop of this serenity, and I intend to make it last a lifetime. My name is Vanessa Pierce. I was divorced, discarded, and disrespected. And then I reminded them, legally, financially, irrevocably, exactly who they were dealing with. They bet against the wrong woman. And yes, I sleep well, I laugh often, and I never, ever answer blocked calls. That's not revenge, that's recovery. If my story resonated with you, please take a moment to like, comment, and share. Your support helps more women find their voice and courage. Follow me for more real stories of resilience and transformation. Have you ever had to reclaim what was rightfully yours? Tell me your story in the comments below. Remember, we heal better together.